parking is costing you money. Perhaps it costs you $20, but you made $80 on the fact your driver got that much further down the road. Municipalities have started fining drivers, predatory towing, predatory fining, predatory booting, to where now carriers are actively seeking alternatives to get their drivers safely parked.
Welcome to This Week in Trucking. My name is Caroline, and today we have an awesome guest with us here, the CEO of truckparkingclub.com, Evan Shelley. Thanks so much for being here, Evan.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, so tell us a little bit about how in the world you got into the truck parking issue.
Yeah, so my background is in real estate, and through doing real estate deals back in 2021, I figured out about the truck parking issue. I had a piece of property under contract that was zoned industrial that I was looking at to build warehousing on, and ultimately it wasn't a good fit for warehousing, so I started looking at other alternatives. Came across truck parking. Everyone was telling me it's a great investment. There's not enough demand. Through those conversations, I'm like, this seems to make a lot of sense to develop this particular parcel for truck parking. So I take the parcel to the municipality and say, hey, here's what I want to do. I want to develop truck parking. And they're like, we're not going to support it. None of the surrounding parcels are going to support it. And that's when the light bulb went off. I'm like, okay, if based on my conversations, but it appears difficult to build more of what's really going on here. So that was in 2021. And over the next 6 to 12 months, really looked into the business of truck parking, why it's happening, understanding transportation and trucking in general, and really saw that there was a really interesting problem to be solved.
Yeah. Tell us about the issue of truck parking, just in trucking in general. Why is it so hard to find places to park? Why is this even an issue to begin with? Yeah.
So, the stats thrown around are one space for every 11 trucks. On average, it takes a driver 56 minutes per day to look for parking. I think the issue is really part of what I just said. So NIMBY, not in my backyard. No one really wants it around them. Another thing is from the public side, governments haven't really thought or coordinated enough into their zoning, and also on the public funding side, where there just hasn't been enough built on like rest areas. It just wasn't planned properly, quite clearly, over the last 2 to 3 decades. Wasn't really considered as much as it should have been. And that all comes together to where you just have this massive lack of supply of parking. It's expensive to build on top of that. So you got to make sense of the ROI. So you have 3 or 4 factors that really contribute to this problem.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about that. The NIMBY thing, it reminds me of the issue with the housing crisis, right? We know that there's not enough houses. Yeah. There's not enough housing supply. And part of the reason there's not enough housing supply is because there's a lot of people that don't want multifamily buildings built around them or near their home. They think it's going to reduce their property values. Now, that seems to be one of the big drivers here, and changing zoning laws can be really difficult, and government is slow, and we're really slow to understand even the problem, let alone the solutions to it. How did Truck Parking Club come in and change what was going on, and how did you speed up the development of truck parking?
Yeah, so it's funny you say that. Out of all the podcasts I've done, no one's ever brought up the affordable housing crisis. Actually, my background, I used to consult for affordable housing nonprofit.
And your real estate
they are very
experience.
similar. Yeah, they are very similar. It's an interesting analogy because if they do experience NIMBY, right, in affordable housing and housing in general and multifamily housing. But yeah, definitely there are very clear similarities in NIMBY being the biggest one. Ultimately, what we did at Truck Parking Club is really flip it on its head and say, there's all this existing space that's already properly zoned. The problem is it's 10 spaces in the back of a trucking company's yard. It's 35 spaces at a warehouse where you have to take that supply, put it on a marketplace like Truck Parking Club, and then aggregate that demand to it and do it all in a very seamless way where the drivers have a great experience when they book with you, and also the property owners have a great experience and they make money and they feel like it's worth their time and their effort and the maintenance of the property. So you have to take this theory of leveraging existing space that's already out there and then really apply it and then execute so you deliver a great experience to both parties. But
Right.
if you do that, like what we've done, it's a very big world out there, and that you can create a lot of new truck parking and you can get a lot of drivers safely parked by leveraging all this existing space. And it's easy to theorize. It's much harder to put into action and then put it together and get it to 1,500 locations and tens of thousands of drivers.
And I guess what the big barrier there is, if I have space for 10 trucks in the back of my warehouse, for me to try and offer that to drivers, I guess I could do it for drivers that are coming to my warehouse to drop stuff off. But now I have to administer it, and I have to figure out how to market it. I have to figure out how to price it. It's like a lot of hassle that if I just had a platform to put it up and look, I have these 10 spaces and people can come here and park. Everything else is managed for me. Plus, then that gets added to all the other spaces. That times 100. Now you've got 1,000 parking spots on one app. And it's not one app for every state or every county or every jurisdiction. You've got just one app with all of the spaces on it. So there's something about aggregating that makes it a lot more useful and available to people.
Yeah, exactly. You said it really well. Realizing that, okay, it's great. You have 10 extra spaces in the back of your yard. In a perfect world, drivers come and go, they get leased out, not a big deal. But in reality, taking those spaces and maximizing those spaces, making money on them and offering them up to drivers is quite a bit of work. And I would say without that platform that you referenced, it's probably not worth your time. Perhaps if someone rents all 10 spaces on a long-term lease, that's an ideal scenario. There's still going to be administrative costs and things that are involved in your time and effort. But what we've done is considered, hey, this property owner is a business owner in a whole other business. They're running this warehouse. They're doing their respective business inside of that warehouse, whatever the case may be. We want to just automate the entire experience for them, from 24/7, 365 customer service made up of former drivers, the app that any driver can go on and book, the payments, the payouts, the billing, the collections, all these things that you don't really consider until you start doing it. We've really automated that entire process. So that business owner, that respective property owner, can go about all their other things and monetize this extra space. And most importantly, offer up those spaces for safe parking for drivers.
Yeah, let's talk about that experience from the driver's perspective then. You said that it takes, on average, almost an hour for drivers to find a place to park on average. What does that do to a business owner that's trying to run a trucking business? How does that impact them?
I think up until us, I think it's just the cost of doing business. I think it's just something that you accept. And I think that you just accept that your drivers are going to park on the side of shoulders of interstates, on ramps, off ramps, random lots, etc. I think it's just became a bit of a normalcy. What started to change is that municipalities have started fining drivers nuclear verdicts from collisions and fatalities, predatory towing, predatory fining, predatory booting. All these things have come together to where now carriers are actively seeking alternatives to get their drivers safely parked, because they can really reduce a ton of costs, become more efficient, and most importantly, keep their drivers safe. So it's been a cost of doing business. And what we're doing is really taking that and saying, hey, what about you take the surety of saying your driver's going to have a space another 2 hours down the road instead of them driving around for an hour looking for parking, and you create inefficiencies. Although that parking is costing you money, perhaps it costs you $20, but you made $80 on the fact that your driver got that much further down the road. It didn't have to worry about finding, booting, towing, didn't have to worry about wasting time and fuel, like all these things that are considered.
So you've got on one end the most mundane thing that people can just get used to on a day-to-day basis. Oh, it's just a fact that I have to spend this much time running my truck just trying to find parking. So it's one cost there that you might not, if you're used to it, you might not really feel it. You're definitely going to feel a fine if you get fined for something. You are definitely going to feel it if you have to get towed, and now you have to pay thousands of dollars to get your truck back. But there's also a huge safety concern there. And not only could you get fined, could you get towed, you could get hit. You might be parked somewhere that's not safe for you as a person, not safe for your equipment, not safe for the cargo that you're hauling. You might not be in a secure location. So all of those things add up to putting costs on businesses. For a big mega carrier, that those costs, they might want to reduce that, and they might have a whole department focused on reducing that. But if you're a 1 truck or 2 truck or even 10 truck operation, you don't have the resources to deal with a catastrophe like that. And you certainly don't want to have to deal with a catastrophe of not parking well, right? Now, I think what you're getting to is maybe people aren't used to paying for parking all the time, but maybe it's worth it. There's been some controversy over this, and Truck Parking Club was the center of some controversy last year, where it was unclear to some people, okay, is Truck Parking Club actually making new spaces available, or are they just taking spaces that used to be free and charging for them? Can you talk about how that came about and how you responded to that?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we get pushback sporadically. It comes and goes, but the controversy is around essentially that our business is we help drivers get safely parked. We provide parking for truckers by monetizing vacant properties for landowners, right? And that's what's written on our site, and pretty much anywhere you go, some version of that, you're going to find that. Well, truck stops started approaching us pretty early on saying, hey, I have these spaces in my lot and I want to monetize them. I've heard about you guys have this app and everything. What can you do with us? And we curated a solution for them. And I didn't at the time really think about it. It's a business owner that is wanting to do paid parking at their truck stop, which in America is their right until they become regulated. If truck stops become regulated, then maybe they won't have a choice anymore. But they ultimately, the reason truck stops do that is because their parking lot remains full, but no one comes in their store and spends money, or they don't buy fuel. And so we started adding truck stops to the platform, and now I think they're 3 to 4% of our business. But if you looked at some of the controversy, they would say it's 97% of our business. But how we see it is that the business owner has a choice to do what they want with their property. We're the back end solution, the software to that. We don't own the property. We don't hold contract to the property. We don't put a gun to the truck stop owner's head and say, you have to do this. And a lot of them already do paid parking themselves. I think we just created a system to where it runs smoothly within their operations. And ultimately, that got a lot of pushback. But looking at from the driver's perspective, paid parking has been around for decades, but to start seeing it more and more often, and it's not just Truck Parking Club, by the way, there are many other companies that do it. We just have a pretty large following, so we get the brunt of it. But I understand that from the driver's perspective, 100%, going from almost no paid parking to a world in the last 5 to 10 years where it's like much more often, especially you've got Pilot doing it, TAs doing it actively. I see from their perspective, and it sucks. And especially for company drivers where they're not getting reimbursed for that parking, and some of the carriers, not all of them, some of the carriers aren't offering to reimburse them. Some carriers do pay for it, and we have the data to show that, but some of them don't. And I feel for company drivers that are driving around someone else's truck and trailer and then having to be asked to pay for parking. I understand that it sucks, but I also see the truck stop's perspective. And I think it's a free market, right? And the truck stop's going to have to do what they think is best for their business. And that carrier is making the decision not to reimburse their company driver. And they're saying that's the best decision for my business. Now, ultimately, the company driver takes the brunt of it because that's coming out of their paycheck. I think that really sucks, right? Because you think about like business travel, typically for an employee, if it's not a salesperson, they're getting all that business travel paid for. In this situation, that company driver's not getting it paid for. And I think that sucks. Now, the thing that you won't really hear people say, hopefully it becomes more and more common, is like carriers are actively starting to pay for for truck parking more often. And we see it, and it's happening more, and we're actually promoting it because we make it very easy for carriers to reimburse them. Historically, it's been like a very clunky process to get that reimbursed. What we've created is something that we make it now very easy and second nature to reimburse drivers for parking. I could talk for hours about it, but ultimately, that's kind of it. It's a tough scenario, and I feel for everyone on all sides. Truck stops go out of business. Carriers go out of business, company drivers leave carriers. And the tension between those three parties, truck parking is stuck in the middle. and Truck Parking Club is become the face of it, which is fine because at the end of the day, half of our team is former drivers. Everything we do, we're trying to push to make it easier on the driver. We do think paying $20 for a parking spot is much safer for a driver than parking on the side of the road. And ideally, the carrier that company driver is working for is reimbursing them, or hopefully in the near future, they will start. Paying for a driver's parking is a very strong retention tool as well. So I think it's a very interesting thing. And perhaps sometime in the future, we'll put out kind of a long form podcast or article about it. But it's a great question. It's a very interesting topic. And honestly, we don't mind it because we think as long as our ethics and our morals and our values are aligned and we are doing everything we can for the driver, we feel okay about it.
Tell me more about what you're doing for drivers. One of the things that you had talked about in another interview last year was maybe being able to accept points. So drivers will get points for fueling, for showers, for buying stuff at a truck stop, and then often will use those points to pay for those spaces. Now, if those spaces are now Truck Parking Club and I can't use my points, that's an issue. Have you been able to add that functionality to your app already?
So loyalty points, you're saying from a third party, let's say Pilot or something of that nature. We've been in talks with them really since the first controversy came out, maybe a year or so ago. No, we haven't been able to get any traction on getting them to add it. It's not our decision. We would do it tomorrow. We would have done it 12 months ago. I think it's cool. If Pilot doesn't allow it, it's not to say they don't even allow it. It's more of they're this huge company and these things take a lot of time. We actively press them to get it added because I think we have maybe 8 to 10 dealer pilots on our platform, and we're ready when they're ready. I would be more than happy to offer them. And we're actively talking with other truck stops and associations about adding their loyalty points as well. We think it's a no-brainer and we're all in on adding that.
And to be clear, of the over 1,000 stops, parkings that you have on truckparkingclub.com, what percentage of those are at big truck stops?
Big truck stops or just truck stops? Truck
stops where the spots used to be free or you could pay for them with points and are now paid spots on truckparkingclub.com.
There are independent truck stops that you wouldn't call them big, but when you get there, it's like a really huge place. I'll just tell you total number of truck stops. I think we have 40 to 45 of them and we just crossed over 1,500 locations. So around 3%. That number obviously fluctuates. It may be 3.2% tomorrow. It may be 2.8. It may be 4. It moves around. But as we sit here today, it's around 3%.
So you would say about 3% of the spots, total number of parking spots, maybe used to be free to people buying things at those truck stops, now are paid, and 97% of the spots are actually new spots that wouldn't be available without Truck Parking Club.
I think generally speaking, yes, but a lot of them not. Some percentage of them were already doing paid parking.
Got it. Right. And they just came onto your platform.
Yeah. And think about the Pilot locations. They have the option to do prime parking through Pilot. It's not like we're forcing them to use Truck Parking Club. That property owner that runs that Pilot chooses to use us. It's once again one of those things and where my understanding, perhaps they were doing paid parking in some capacity. I don't know if it was through Pilot or not. And then they came to us and wanted to use us. But just generally speaking, you could say, yes, that property owner, that truck stop owner made the decision to either continue doing paid parking or start doing paid parking on some percentage of their lot. There's also part of it too is, okay, paid parking is fine, but you can't go to 100%. That's the truck stop owner's decision as well. And I think maybe we have 2 out of the 45, we'll say under 5 out of the 45 go to 100% paid parking. And all it is a function of that truck stop owner making the decision on how many people are walking in this door and how many people are in that lot. So if my parking lot is full and let's say it's 100 drivers, and 50 of them come in the door and spend money, or 50 of them fuel up, let's say 50 out of the 100 total, how many of them are you going to make paid so you can at least make something on someone using your lot? Let's say perhaps maybe it's 50%. Maybe that makes sense. But it may be a situation where it's much slower than that. It may be a situation where it's much higher than that. It's a business decision for that truck stop. The interesting thing is if that truck stop is making a decision to alienate drivers from parking in their lot and in theory spending money with them, but they still make that decision. because they know the numbers. A lot of them are small business owners. Every dollar counts. They're not printing money. Just like drivers are in a tough spot, most truck stops, I'm not saying all truck stops, but most truck stops aren't killing it by any means. So it is a very interesting concept. But yeah, 3% to answer your question.
Cool. It's not entirely clear to me exactly why that controversy blew up in the first place. It seems like Truck Parking Club has actually opened up a lot more spaces, even more than some of the big truck stop brands have been able to. Can you talk about the evolution of that? Like, how many stops did you start with? How many have you grown to? What's the projection to the future?
Yeah, we call them property member locations. We just passed over 1,500 last night. We're at about 30,000 spaces. We're the largest aggregation of truck parking in the U.S. outside the major truck stops. And we did it in 26 months. As far as like the controversy side of things, we have definitely added more new spaces than taking free spaces at truck stops. I still understand why they don't like it. It doesn't matter. Drivers aren't going to care any less what the good things that we've done on the other side of it. I think it is just the realities. And like I said earlier, I think company drivers really do. It's a tough situation. I do think that narrative's changing though. But yeah, we went from 0 to 1,500 locations in 26 months. And we've added, I guess at this point, tens of thousands of spaces that were never before available. We help tens of thousands of drivers get safely parked, and we're very proud of that. But we also think we're just getting started, and we're going to keep doing our thing and focus on our core mission. And at the end of the day, Truck Parking Club's mission is to help truckers save time and fuel by efficiently finding and reserving truck parking across the U.S. As long as we stay aligned with that mission and do good for the driver and do everything we can and be the best stewards that we can, we're very proud of what we've done. Although the controversy.
Can you talk about how that compares to other projects? There's a lot of government funding that goes into infrastructure. There's truck stops themselves that build new locations. And obviously that's a whole other thing. So you have to build out fueling infrastructure and their stores and everything. But how does your growth of the number of spots that you've been able to open up compare to other projects that are going on?
Yeah, I guess one thing I would comment on is on average, it costs the, we'll say state and federal government $150,000 plus per truck parking space. It's quite a substantial number.
Is that per year or just to open it up, or what does that number represent?
So if you pull into a rest area and let's say it just been developed anywhere in the U.S., on average, the cost for one of those truck parking spaces to build is $150,000. So if there is 100 spaces, what is that, $15 million?
So that's not including maintenance afterward. That's just to open it up.
Yeah, that's just to open it up. So $15 million for 100 spaces. And some of them go much higher than that. And some of them are maybe a little bit less than that. But on average, what we've seen is about $150,000. So that same $15 million, we do that in a couple of days of creating new space, leveraging existing space. We'll do that in 2 days, 3 days.
And is it just because those government projects are trying to acquire new land and build that out by just acquiring new land instead of trying to work with the property owner themselves?
Yeah. So I think it's a function of they have to go out, they have to do all the entitlements, engineering, acquisition of the site, development of the site, and you're doing that all inside of a government municipality and can become quite costly. And that's not unusual for government projects. I think private sector gets it down less than that, which is great. I think, but for private sector, they have to make a return and they still have an asset. And then that comes with ramifications if you can't deliver the right. Yeah, it's just an immense cost. It's an immense undertaking for something that you look out and you see this 75 by 12 spot and you're like, that costed $150,000. But when it all comes down to it, it does. There's a lot of work to it. But if you leverage existing space like what we do, there's no assets. There's essentially zero cost compared to what the government's spending or even what the private sector is spending on it. But then the other question mark is that private property owner wants to get paid. Yeah.
Right.
So that's the difference.
It's just that cost isn't paid up front. So how much can I make as a property owner on a single spot in a year on average?
I think we get asked that question all the time by really prospective property owners and things of that nature. It all depends on the market.
Right.
Really, it's a market by market basis and it varies widely. I can speak to, let's just say, daily prices. So
Like you
on
said,
average,
$20, right?
Yeah.
$20 is the average. So it's $7,000 in a year. If I'm renting it
depends on
every single
occupancy
day.
and stuff. Yeah. There's definitely nuance to it. And just because you have it at $20, does it get rented out? Is it occupied half the time? But if you change the price, it'd be 100% full if you went to 10. So that's the same number. I don't know why I said that, but let's say you went to $15 and you doubled your occupancy. But there is definitely nuance to it. But some markets, $25 a day, and it does stay full. And we continually look for more capacity. So I'm in Vegas right now for a conference. We have a handful of lots around here, and they essentially just stay full. And it's just a supply constrained market.
Just trying to think, like, how would you even get to that $150,000 of a spot just alone if I have to pay a private property owner $7,000 a year to use a space for truck parking, and that's doing it every single day of that year, it would take me like 20 years to get to that 150,000. There's also, it's not free to maintain a lot that Class 8 trucks drive on, right? So there's also a cost in that. But that $150,000, like what you said, that's actually not including any of the maintenance. That's just upfront cost of developing that one spot. But again, it would take you like 20 years to get to $150,000. So it's just an enormous differential.
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation. The $150K comes from taxpayers, right? So instead of the cost coming from just drivers, it gets split from not just drivers, but also all taxpayers. So it's an interesting conversation that, considering there's no such thing as a free lunch, and like, where does the cost go and where should the cost go? The cost does have to go somewhere.
And where does the cost, and who's paying the cost?
Exactly. And who's benefiting from the parking, who's the main stakeholders, who should pay for the parking. Is it taxpayers? Is it company drivers? Is it carriers? I think there's pretty common sense approaches to like a decent amount of this stuff. It's on who should bear the cost and who bears the cost now. But you could write a book. You could write a book on it. It's a really interesting topic that when I started this company, I was very ignorant to it and have become enlightened on like the entire thing. And I honestly feel for all parties involved because it's a complex topic, but I think we push to make it a little bit better.
Can you talk about the safety concerns that drivers have? How do you manage and make sure that the spaces that you're opening up for drivers are safe and compliant? What happens with enforcement? For example, somebody else is in my spot. Or how do you deal with those conflicts and issues for drivers? Yeah.
So I would say on your first part of your question, as far as like the safety of the lots and things of that nature, we do everything we can to ensure that the lot is a suitable place for truck parking. But what you'll find in freight is that if someone, let's just say it's a high value load or something, if a thief wants to get that high value load, I don't care if you have a 10-foot wall with electric fencing on the top. Like, they're going to figure out a way to get to that load and steal the goods. And people in the industry are well aware of that. So you can never do enough to 100% guarantee. But what we do is we make sure, it is our obligation to make sure that we show the driver, the fleet manager, the dispatcher, whoever's booking this parking spot, that they know exactly what they're getting. And that can be security, fence, gated, cameras, lighting, or it could just be an open lot, or it could be something in between. And what our job is to do is say, hey, here's everything you're getting. Here's photos of the property. You know exactly what you're getting. And then when they book with us, the experience they get matches what we say they're going to get, because just an open lot works in a lot of scenarios. And It's much safer than the on-ramp or off-ramp of an interstate. And at this point, 99% of truck stops are open lots. You go look at them, there's some assumption that there's security, but there's not. It's literally just an open lot. And 99% of the time, there isn't any more safety there than just any other open lot. It's, like I said, we have to deliver exactly what we say that driver's going to get at the lot. And if we execute on that, then we do our jobs and drivers are happy. If we don't do that, then we deliver bad experiences Not good for us, not good for the brand, not good for the driver. So we're very strict about the properties we approve, and we're very strict about making sure we know exactly what we're delivering to the driver. And then in the cases of booking spots and not getting spaces and things of that nature, we actively track that. It's extremely rare in the case of something happening and enforcement is needed and stuff like that. But we do everything we can to just resolve the issue. I know it's there's a lot of controversy with, hey, I reserved this spot, and then someone's in my spot, and then no one does anything about it, which sucks. Fortunately, we have private lots, so it's an anomaly if something like that ever happens.
You mentioned about your customer service team. Talk about what you did differently. And I think this is the first time that I've heard about a trucking app employing drivers to do their customer service. What gave you that idea, and how did you build that team?
Yeah, it was just this grand idea that just came to me. No, it was literally, I started the app. I started getting a little bit of traction. I got some customers. I was calling every single customer, talking to them, just asking them about the app, what they thought, how I could improve their experience at the property. And one of the ladies I talked to was just really good over the phone. And I was like, I'm going to need customer service. Do you have any interest? And she's, we're actually getting off the road soon. She drove team with her husband, and the timing was just really good. And she came on as customer service. We call it customer care. She was a former driver, and now she runs a team of 12 people, and she built the entire department from scratch, and they're all former drivers. Actually, she has a team of 16 people. Yeah. But she built the entire department from scratch, and we could tell it was just she and I for a while. Like, the company was, she and I were essentially the ops for the business for the first 6 months plus, maybe 8 months. And we could tell that it worked really well because she could resonate with the drivers. And I want to keep doing this. And now we hire drivers like all the way across the company. We have former drivers in all kinds of different positions. Now we actually don't talk about it enough, but we try to exclusively hire former drivers. It's not always possible, obviously, but we try to as much as possible. But it works really well because the drivers resonate when speaking with our team that have been there and done that and experienced the really tough days, and you're in a bad mood and you're having an issue, you can't find parking. Our teams experience that too. So we're able to just make their day hopefully a little bit easier.
That's awesome. All right. Thank you so much, Evan, for joining us. Is there anything else that you want people to know about Truck Parking Club?
No, I thought your questions were awesome. You asked 2 or 3 questions that I never get asked, which is great. Just go check us out. Truck Park. All our socials are in the footer. You can book right through the app. Onboarding's easy. If you want to add a property, you can do that as well, right through the app or website. And if you want to call in and talk to a former driver, you can call 888-899-PARK. That's 888-899-7275.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Evan. If you enjoyed this conversation with Evan Shelley, CEO of Truck Parking Club, make sure you subscribe to our channel, This Week in Trucking, and also leave any questions or comments that you have for Evan in the comments below, and we will get those questions to him and get you some answers.